Let's open up our Bibles to John chapter 9. I want to thank the music ministry for taking us to church. Thank Timmy and Rachel for doing a phenomenal job sharing and bringing us to the cross. We're going to continue our mini-series in the chapter in John 9 where Jesus heals a man who's blind. And just to remind you, if you weren't there last week, what we're doing and how we're introducing the series, we're talking about vision, spiritual vision. And last week we talked about fault. And as we read in the first couple of verses of the chapter, and we'll read again, everyone was wondering who sinned that made this guy blind. And we talked about all the ways that we blame shift and look for excuses and fault in our own life. And then also, we are today going to be talking about fear, and then next week we'll talk about fact and faith, and we'll finish up the series, and then a reminder, Easter, which is actually Passover Easter, because Passover will be celebrating the night before into Easter on that Sunday, April 8th. We have Jordan McLeod coming in, who at one point led our churches in Jerusalem and all over the Middle East, and is living here in Jersey now, and comes from a Hebrew background as a Jew, but is saved by the blood of Christ. And so it's a wonderful time for him to be able to come and share about sort of both of his traditions. So we're going to continue with this series and prepare to have the vision that we need to be able to celebrate Passover and Easter. You guys in John chapter 9? How you guys doing today? Yeah. Not too dark for you out there? I don't want your vision to be affected. John 9:1, excuse all the horrible humor. As he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" "Neither this man nor his parents sinned," said Jesus. "But this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in his life. As long as it is day, we must do the work of him who sent me. Night is coming, when no one can work. Well, I'm in the world, I am the light of the world." Having said this, he spit on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. I mean, what would you do, right? Makes sense. "Go," he told him, "wash in the pool of Siloam." This word means sent. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. His neighbors and those who had formerly seen him begging asked, "Isn't this the same guy who used to sit and beg?" And some claimed that he was. Others said, No, he just looks like him." But he himself insisted on the man. "How then were your eyes opened?" they demanded. He replied, "The man they called Jesus made some mud and put it on my eyes. He told me to go to Siloam and wash, so I went and washed, and then I could see." "Where is this man?" they asked him. "I don't know." They brought to the Pharisees the man who had been blind. Now, the day on which Jesus had made the mud and opened the man's eyes was a Sabbath. Therefore, the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. "Put mud on my eyes," the man replied, "and I wash, and now I see," like I said before. Some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he doesn't keep the Sabbath." But others asked, "How can a sinner do such miraculous signs?" So they were divided. Finally, they turned again to the blind man. "What have you to say about him? It was your eyes he opened." The man replied, "He's a prophet." The Jews still did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they sent for the man's parents. "Is this your son?" they asked. "Is this the one you say was born blind? How is it that now he can see?" "Well, we know he's our son," the parents answered. "We know he was born blind, but how he can see now or who opened his eyes, we don't know. Ask him, he's of age, he'll speak for himself." Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Dad. His parents said this because they were afraid. They were afraid of the Jews. For already the Jews had decided that anyone who acknowledged that Jesus was the Christ would be put out of the synagogue. That was why his parents said, "He is of age. Ask him." All right, let's focus in on verse 22, and let's talk a little bit about what's going on here. We talked last week how they were wondering who sinned. It's got to be someone's fault. There's got to be a mistake here, because anyone born blind, that must be either he sinned in the womb, right, which we discussed is a little ridiculous, but that's a debate that still happens today. If the babies actually sin in the womb and then cause themselves consequences after they're born. Or the parents must have sinned, or there's some kind of genetic, inherited, passed along legacy of sin. There must be a reason. And Jesus says, no, sorry. It's just the way it is, and it's so that God can display His great power. This week, we're learning a little bit more about the culture because blindness is already seen as a sign of sin. We talked about how no priest could serve as a priest if they were blind. There was some kind of a mark on this. The Pharisees were already plotting to kill Jesus at this time, and so anyone that was associated with this guy could be implicated, guilty by association, right? So the parents are extra careful here. Mom and dad are scared. They are afraid of being thrown out of the community, of the culture, of the good graces of the Pharisees, of the tradition. They were in fear of being labeled as overt sinners. So the parents pass the buck. Say, he can answer for himself.
Right.
The synagogue had become a god to so many 2,000 years ago. The religious life, the order, the structure, and not necessarily God Himself, but the tradition that was created around it. And so, the opinions of their peers, the community, the church leaders, all made them afraid to speak up. Now, for us today, we can learn a great lesson from mom and dad, because even today, fear can block our faith, right? It blurs our spiritual vision. And it's not just a spiritual phenomenon, this is actually a physical phenomenon as well. It's called conversion disorder. It used to be called hysteria. It's a neurosis marked by the appearance of physical symptoms such as partial loss of muscle function, including blindness, without physical cause, but in the presence of a physiological conflict. Has anyone ever experienced any kind of like tunnel vision or blurred vision when you experienced something that was pretty graphic in nature or scary? No one in the room? Maybe you don't have to raise your hand if it's uncomfortable. It's fine. But Vanderbilt University researchers came out recently and said, man, you know what? This is really interesting. Research has shown that there are limits to how much information we can hold in our visual short-term memory. So we often miss visual image that passes right before our eyes if we're paying attention to something else. You ever zone out?
Yeah.
And like, did you not see the stop sign? And you're like, no, I guess I didn't. And if we're shown an unexpected image that impacts us emotionally, a situation that researchers now have dubbed emotion-induced blindness. We were in Moscow a couple years ago, Arlene and I, we went to the Russian circus, and this is sort of like a famous circus out there. They're known for all their acrobatics and their work with animals in the circus. And so we showed up. We were a little tired that day. We had been serving all over in the Moscow church, and so we showed up at the circus with another couple, and we walked into the circus. And we're sort of still kind of like wiping our eyes. We had just taken a little nap. We were exhausted. And we opened up our eyes, and right there in the foyer, as you come in to the circus area before you actually enter into the arena, there are all these animals. All right? Now, there's a difference between a hamster and like a huge bear, right? There's a difference between a cat and a lion or a tiger, right? And so this is the kind of image that we saw when we showed up. It was gigantic animals with huge claws on tiny shoestring leashes, taking pictures with kids. One tiger, we were in shock, so I didn't take a picture, but one tiger had like a little, like 2-year-old toddler all dressed up, cuddled in between its claws.
Oh my gosh.
On like this little tiny leash. And so I was like, wow, this is bizarre. Never seen anything like this. And I turned to my right, and Arlene is starting to lose it. She's like, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. And I'm like, okay, are you okay? Are you okay? I can't believe what I'm seeing. And so her vision started to blur up. And I asked her to share the story, but she didn't want to come up and share it. So I have been right so far. And she basically lost vision because of this traumatic event that happened as she was watching it. And you might too, if you were a mom seeing kids right there with that thing, you know? I mean, they're holding hands. That's what they saw. They're buddies, you know? Later on, the same bear was on ice skates. Yeah. And scoring goals in a hockey. Anyways, it's a long story. Still not quite sure if that actually happened. but I think it did. We have a lot of fears. A lot of fears. There are all kinds of phobias. Are you familiar with this one? Barophobia, you ever heard of that one?
Yeah.
Many of us might have a fear of this. It's fear of gravity. You ever get a little worried when you get near the edge of something, you know? All right, or just walking. Gravity is not my friend. There's several. I can't believe actually how many there are. I don't even know how to pronounce them. Tichophobia, you guys know this one?
Spiders.
Close. I think that's arachnophobia, but this is a fear of failure. How about ecclesiophobia? You can figure that one out. Thank you for overcoming your ecclesiophobia and coming today. Yeah, fear of church, right? Fear of church. It's like we have an allergic reaction sometimes, right?
Oh, wow.
So you can now use that as your reason. People are going to start leaving now. I started to leave. All right, so there's more phrenomenophobia. I don't know how to pronounce that. That's like next time, students, listen up. Next time you have a really hard question, you know, in class, you can just say, "I'm suffering from phrenomenophobia." That's the fear of thinking. It's really difficult. Logizomechanophobia. You know what that one is, right? Yeah, everyone knows that. I'll skip to the next one.
What?
I'm just kidding. It's fear of computers. Some of you might have that. There's magiricophobia, fear of cooking. Syngenesiphobia. I have fear of cooking. Syngenesiphobia. That's fear of relatives, right? For those of us that don't watch Leno, you might have geniophobia, the fear of chins. I don't know how to describe to you. That's the fear of the number 13. That's all New Yorkers right now. Yeah. And then homilophobia. That's like today, if you walk out, you might have a fear of sermons, right? So that's homilophobia. And then maybe one more for good measure. Consequentialophobia. That's fear of chopsticks. To be honest, some of us have real fear of chopsticks. Can you guys guess what the top 3 fears are? They're not here, but and there's a lot of top 10. Yeah, Brad, you have okay, like, is that fear of going outside? No, it's not that. It's not the top 3. Anyone else want to guess top 3, Chad? Xenophobia, like fear of like outsiders, or no, it's not. Lamont? Fear of speaking in public. Yeah, that's one of the top 3. And
Lying.
no, but that's a good one. Yeah.
Fear of death.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll just tell you. No, you got it. That's 2 out of the 3. But anyone else want to try to guess? Like, okay, go ahead. Acro? No. Germophobia. That's a good one, but no. Right, last one, Roy? No spiders, but close. All right, so in the top 3, you look at all kinds of different polls and surveys. Usually, somewhere in the top 3 is death, public speaking, and snakes. Wow. Right? That's what I'm talking about. So, I want to talk a little bit about snakes. And I just warned you, we're going to talk about snakes now. And I'm going to show you pictures of snakes and a video of a snake. So just be ready. And if you feel like you need to exit the room or close your eyes, that's fine. Alright, so Revelation 12, it helps us to understand a little bit about the original serpent in Genesis chapter 1, right? Who is who? Satan, right? And then here in Revelation 12, the first and last book of the Bible, talk about this ancient serpent called the devil or Satan. There are a lot of things that we can learn about this analogy to help us in our fight to be righteous. First of all, if you look at the World Health Organization, some of their stats, 5 million people around the world are bitten by snakes each year. As many as 200,000 die. You don't hear that very often, though, do you? And about 400,000 lose limbs. That's not to mention all the other consequences and implications from bites. But those are just a couple of big ones right there.